Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my LCK Finals overview and analysis. We have been building and building and building to this point, the crescendo point of the LCK in summer of 2022. The two best teams have made their way here through the bracket, through the regular season, and are going to be facing off in a best of 5 to determine the best team in the most prestigious league in the world. Historically, LPL fans don't scream at me, in League of Legends. And man, I have been excited for this. This is the first finals we will be covering on the channel, and I am pumped because there was a lot of hype for me going into this series. But before we get into any of that, let me know down in the comments section below how you thought this series was going to go. You had Gen.G, who had been looking unbeatable up until this point, but you had the kings of the LCK, T1, who had just come off of an unbeaten streak in spring, opposing them. I mean, really, this was the matchup that we all wanted to see in the finals of the LCK, and we got it. So how exactly did it go? Well, let's start off by let's kick it off by giving you the breakdown here. I did a full analysis of it, but our grand finals, our LCK championship matchup here was between the #1 seeded Gen.G team and the #2 seeded T1 team. They were always a step above everybody else in the league, and it really wasn't all that close. There were times where teams like Live Sandbox or Damwon, hell, even a team like KT or DRX could really make a case for being on that level, but nobody could really break through. Nobody could really take down the Kings, and throughout the season, these two proved that they are the top of the top in the LCK in Korea here. So how do these two teams stack up against each other? Well, I obviously detailed it quite a bit in my semi-finals overview, which you can check out in the top right corner right now, but I'll talk about it a little bit here. Gen.G has been the dominant team in the regular season. These teams did split their series 1-1, but when Gen.G took the win, they didn't drop a single game. And so where do I think that the advantages lie here? Well, obviously, Ruler and Chovy are just so dominant, but Zeus has been really, really strong in the top lane, and if anybody's going to falter on Gen.G, it would be Doran. So I really do think it is possible for either of these teams to be walking out of here with the LCK title. Gen.G really fighting for an uphill battle, an organization that's never won a title, at least in the LCK. A lot of players who are searching for their first title, 4 of them to be precise, versus T1, the perennial juggernaut, a team that just won as recently as spring. So what happened here in this series? Well, let's jump right into game #1. And game #1 was a Gen.G victory. They come out firing in this series with a really dominant game #1 win. They had control of this game pretty much the entirety of it, and most of that was because of the ridiculous amount of gold that was shuttled into Ruler on this Zeri. A phenomenal game from him. He was the MVP in the LCK, both given and, my award as well. He was clearly the best player in the region this year, and he is proving it over and over again throughout the playoffs, and also now jumping into game 1 in the finals, where he goes 16-1-1 on Zeri. You cannot give Ruler this Zeri pick. I understand that there are a lot of things that you have to ban out from Gen.G, but Zeri has to be pretty high on that list. Lucian's up there, Yumi's up there. Hell, you gotta get rid of Poppy as well from Peanut. There's like 80 champions that Chovy can play. Really, Gen.G has a champion Ocean, so there's really no good way to deal with them in draft. Unfortunately for T1, Zeri slips through the cracks, gets Lulu as a little bit of an insurance policy here with Lehens, and Ruler completely takes over the game. He is phenomenal in the back half here, really being unable to die at any point and outputting just a ridiculous amount of damage. Oftentimes, you'll see this Zeri Sivir handshake be taken by a lot of the top teams around the world. We've seen TES JDG do it. We've seen pretty much everybody in the LEC be willing to do it, but it's just a little bit different when you have to go into Ruler, who you know is just going to be able to take over the game. Guma is not going to be able to stop him, and quite frankly, it's not even his fault, really. It's just that Ruler cannot be stopped. Lucian's a very similar champion for Ruler, where it just feels like if he gets that, he wins the game. But as great as Ruler played in this game, he didn't do it by himself. You have to give a ton, and I mean a ton of credit to Peanut in the jungle. I have never seen someone, especially at this level, just have a complete map dominance, quite like Peanut did in terms of just pathing his way into victory. Not only was he playing a champion that was weaker in the early game here in the Sejuani being flexed into the jungle, but he was going into a Wukong who really should have a lot of early game aggression here. And Peanut not only was able to completely outfarm the Wukong, he was able to outgank the Wukong, he also was able to steal a ton of the Wukong's camps. It was genuinely a masterclass of an early jungle performance here from Peanut. One of the best jungle performances I have seen in a very long time. And he did a great job of being able to transition that lead into the bottom lane, giving Ruler what was essentially infinite gold towards the start of this game. And Ruler took that and just compounded it over and over and over again. A phenomenal game from Gen.G. You gotta give Chovy credit on the Azir. Not the flashiest game here in the world, 1, 2, and 15, but still a very, very effective game of Azir. He wasn't the focal point. Lehens did a great job in the back half of making sure Ruler was always safe. And honestly, Lehens did a great job in the mid game, giving Peanut a lot of aggression on the bot side of the map as well, with some excellent vision controls. So overall, just a phenomenal game from Gen.G. Really one of the strongest games that we've seen in a major region this year, and it happened in game 1 of the LCK finals. Now, for T1, it wasn't all that bad. Technically, they got destroyed in this game, but there were some things to take away. First of all, you do have a little bit of a draft conundrum here because you're talking about how you want to build your team, and obviously it's an ADC-centric meta. We've talked about the Zeri-Sivir handshake. You do really need to go for that if you want to keep either of them available. You can't really just let them have Zeri and you take something like the Kalista, especially if you're going to take Lucian off the board. So that leaves you with a lot less options in terms of what you want to prioritize, maybe in some other lanes, and unfortunately, that leaves their best player in a little bit of a tricky spot, their best player being Zeus in the top lane, at least in my opinion, where he really is put on this tank Ornn duty in game 1, and even if he does play relatively okay in the laning phase, he's never really going to be the one that's going to be able to take over the game. You're relying a lot on Guma, you're relying a lot on Keria, and you're especially relying a lot on Owner to be able to create plays and create situations where the team can get ahead. Unfortunately, like I said, Owner just got completely out-jungled. Like, he was pretty embarrassed in this game. On a champion that has a winning matchup, he was super duper far behind, not only in, like I said, jungle pressure, but also in gank pressure. There was really no phase of the game that Owner was winning in. Then you had Guma and Keria, and while I don't hate the Sivir Amumu lane, you really have to win that matchup in order for it to work, and that is mostly, again, because of the Amumu. Whichever one of Zeri Sivir gets more gold is just simply going to do more damage, but Amumu has no other thing to do other than go in and go all the way in, and so if you're losing that bottom lane, the Amumu becomes a complete nuisance for your team. You really can't do anything with that pick. There's a reason I have been advocating for teams to move away from the Amumu unless you feel so solid about your opportunity to win that bottom lane, mostly because you know you're going to send 2 or 3 people down to that bottom lane to make sure that the Sivir Amumu or whatever you pair Amumu with is going to be able to take off. But unfortunately, the Amumu gets far behind, Ruler gets super far ahead, and at that point, the game is just completely over. The Sejuani is unkillable because of the amount of gold that she has, and Faker, while not playing all that awful, just really has no opportunity to play the game. Guma has gold, and he is able to do damage, but it doesn't go anywhere because the amount of damage that Zeri does is 10 times what he's able to put out, and Ruler's able to do it faster, and not to mention he's a better player, better positioner, and Peanut is a better frontliner. Lehens has a lot better of a way to protect Zeri as well, so overall, definitely a rough loss for T1, but it's certainly not series ending by any means. There are certainly things that T1 can do to get back into this. It's just a little bit of a rough way to kick off the series. As for Gen.G, this is basically the perfect start. This was their game from moment 1, and they really played it out. T1 had a couple of moments where, you know, they would trade objectives, and Guma had some gold, and Faker really wasn't all that bad. But at the end of the day, Peanut, Ruler, Lehens really controlled the core of this game from minute 1 and never really let it go. So that was really game 1. Definitely some things need to change for T1, but Gen.G just needs to be able to keep this momentum, contain it, and push forward. So were they able to do that now as we move into our game number 2? Well, game 2 was certainly a different game, and in game 2, we had a Gen.G win. Gen.G is able to take their second game in a row in this series with what I can only describe as the most Gen.G draft of all time. And T1, for their credit, did try to match with some of their picks. I really just have to talk about some of the things that Gen.G brought out in this series that did work for them. I mean, obviously, you can see the bot lane. Nyla, Ghost Cleanse. Nyla, might I add. Singed support, a classic of Lehens that we know he pulls out. And then the Aatrox in the top lane, that's not all that weird. He went Arcane Comet as his rune. Very, very weird comp here from Gen.G, but boy did they pull it off, and boy did they dominate this game. You thought game 1 was a stomp, game 2 was so much worse. I talked about how Peanut really controlled the entire early game by just outpathing Owner. He did that like ×2 in game number 2. This Morgana, this Dark Harvest Morgana coming out from T1 did nothing. You pair that up with the Renekton in the mid lane, something that you really want to be able to take advantage of very, very quickly, because you know that if you don't, you've got the Sylas that's just going to be able to shut down the Renekton, and then you have the Nyla that's going to be able to go in and really just burst down your entire mid line, whether it be the Morgana, whether it be the Gnar if he's not Mega, or even the Zeri, potentially, depending on where she's positioned. So you have to be able to generate that lead early in the game. Unfortunately for T1, Peanut had other plans in mind as he gets back on the Sejuani here, and another phenomenal game from Peanut. He's actually going to get my player of the game here in game number 2. Just unbelievable how well he is able to track Owner and put him in a position where he really can't play the game. Now, Morgana is a fast clearer that should be able to make use of some of these advantageous lanes here, especially the mid and bot, which I actually would put in favor of T1 just in a vacuum, but Peanut played so much better that he was able to get Chovy so much gold. He was able to make sure that the Nyla was a problem in the bottom lane, and that's not to mention the amount of roaming and just general problems that Lehens on this Singed caused throughout the game. And by that point, by the time we hit 10, honestly 15 minutes in the game, it was over. They had towers, they had dragons, they had kills, they had all the gold, and they had all the pressure. And this Gen.G team is just simply too good to be able to relinquish that pressure. A phenomenal showing here from Gen.G, taking what they built upon in game 1 and further compounding it here in game number 2. Really a masterclass of how to play League of Legends at the highest level against some of the best players in the world, might I add. This T1 team is a good team, and Gen.G is making them look like fodder, and it is unbelievable to watch. You gotta give credit to Peanut. You gotta give credit to Chovy here, who really showed up and really played his role on that Sylas, whether it be making sure that the Renekton was in a really tricky spot, making sure that he was super far behind the entirety of the game, and then utilizing that lead to be able to make plays with Peanut, whether it be in the top lane on Zeus on this Gnar, or with Lehens around objectives. There was just a lot of chaos being caused by Gen.G, and they were always the front runners because of it. And then, like I said, you gotta give credit to Lehens. Only he can pull out Singed support in the LCK finals. We saw this coming. This is something he always pulls out in these big games, whether it be T1, whether it be Damwon. Lehens always knows that Singed is his pocket pick and the one that he can really pull out to really confuse a lot of the timings that T1 wants to go for. The Zeri really wants to take some of these 2v2 fights with the Yuumi and be able to compound a lead, be able to get gold, whether it be through trades, whether it be through wins, whatever it ends up being. She just wants to start the snowballing process, and Singed makes that so much more difficult, not only because of how he's able to play the laning phase with flips and repositioning for Zeri, but also because of the pure amount of pressure that he puts on the enemy jungler to really, I don't know, dissuade a lot of the pressure that Owner would want to put on the bottom lane. And then he can go mid lane, he can help a play with Chovy, he can roam up to Rift Herald and really help out in a play like that. Only Lehens plays the support position like this, and it really is a treat to watch when it works, because Ruler is the type of player that can pull off being 1v2 in a lane while everybody else gets a lot of the gold, and he still was very relevant towards the back half of this game on the Nyla. Overall, just a complete masterclass from Gen.G. As for T1, a rough game 2. Like, you thought game 1 was rough. It got even worse here in game number 2. I get what you're going for, but this is a very risky draft. Like I said, you have the Morgana Renekton. That is a very deadly combination if you can get it to work, but you just got really outclassed in terms of pathing in game 1. And Morgana really relies on you being in a better position than your opposing jungler to work. I'm not saying Morgana can't work, but if you're not up in gold on the opposing jungler, Morgana definitely struggles in order to generate leads because she's really not all that good from even. And then you have the Renekton that really is expecting a lot of pressure in the early game. He wants to be able to fight this Sylas and to be able to put pressure for Sylas to have to stay in the lane and not be able to roam to a lot of these objective plays. And there was some miscommunication here from Owner and Faker. They just weren't on the same page with when a lot of these plays needed to take place. Peanut, like I said, hard outplayed Owner to the point where the Morgana really, I believe at the end of the game, really only had 3 stacks of Dark Harvest, or something absurd like that. Like, Owner had no impact on the game. He's my dud of the game for a pretty clear reason. And then Faker really just never got the help that he needed. He still tried to play aggressive, but now you have a Sejuani, now you have a Singed that are going to be collapsing in your lane and making your life a little bit of a living hell. You get to the point in the game where your jungle mid has just lost so hard that you can't really transition to any objectives, you can't really fight over any map pressure. And then, at that point, like, what's the Zeri supposed to do? She has to get hyper-fed for you to even be in this game. And unfortunately for them, Guma couldn't quite do it. So, a phenomenal game from Gen.G, but definitely not what you want to see out of T1. It really feels like this is a one-sided beatdown in the finals right now through the first 2 games. But we've seen a couple of teams reverse sweep. In fact, just yesterday I talked about the Fnatic Excel series. We saw, obviously, TES JD Gaming just a couple of weeks ago. High-pressure scenarios in which teams can bounce back, even after some rough losses in the first 2 games. So, can Gen.G close out the series to win their first LCK title? Can T1 keep their series alive and really maintain the pressure that they need to put onto Gen.G here? It's win or go home for T1 in game number 3. And the win goes to Gen.G. They complete the 3-0 sweep. And you know what's super sweet about that? Not one of these games was close. Not a single one. Game 1, definitely a blowout from early on as Peanut and Ruler took over. Game 2, definitely a blowout from early on as Peanut and Chovy took over. Game 3, a blowout from early on as Peanut and Ruler and Lehens and Chovy all were able to completely steamroll their side of the map with some excellent macro plays and just... I'm so happy for this team. Like, I don't tend to like to show favoritism on this channel, but... man, it just feels good to see Gen.G at the top of the mountain. It feels good to see this team win an LCK title, and they deserved it. A phenomenal game from Ruler here in Game 3. He gets back onto the Zeri. They go back for the handshake. They feel like they have too many priority bans they need to take out. A lot of things that were really causing them trouble. Obviously, you have to ban out the Poppy, and you've really felt, you know, awful going into that Sejuani the entire series here. You also still want to take away the Kalista. Ruler is still one of the best Kalistas in the entire world. Let's not forget about that. But that leaves the Zeri open. So you have to go for the handshake here. You put yourself in a position where you need to win that matchup. And Owner knows it. Owner knows he needs to invest in the bottom lane. Owner knows that he needs to get things going there. But unfortunately, it just never resulted in much. Zeus gets put on a little bit more of an impactful pick here with the Mordekaiser, but he honestly runs it. His laning phase against the Renekton, very poor, and by the time we hit the late game, there's really no one for him to ult other than Peanut potentially around objectives in order to be useful, mostly because he just fell so far behind in the early game. You gotta give credit to Gen.G, though. Peanut, another masterclass of an early game on Xin Zhao, this time a champion that is supposed to do that, where he really is able to take over the full map, where he's able to impact the mid lane and the bot lane all before 7 minutes, to the point where both of those lanes were going to have trouble recovering for T1, and then he could really sit back. Like, that was Xin Zhao's job done. A lot of people talk about Xin Zhao as a champion that is relatively weak in that sense, and I would tend to agree. I don't like these early game, quote-unquote, focused junglers in the meta, but when you pull them off like this, when you can get your lanes spiraling and snowballing, this is what Xin Zhao was made to do, and he did that in this game. Chovy had gold, Ruler especially had gold, and once we got to that point, the game was over. We know that Ruler was too consistent as an AD carry to throw this lead, and he didn't. He gets my player of the game in game number 3. A phenomenal series from Ruler, a phenomenal year from Ruler, and he really, really deserved the MVP that he got in the regular season. He showed up and he proved it here in the finals. Just a beautiful series from Gen.G. Whether it was Peanut winning every game, whether it was Chovy really just being better than Faker, even if they weren't the focal point of the series, whether it was Ruler and Lehens stepping up and being the carry point for Gen.G, whether it was Doran making sure that probably the most mechanically talented player on T1 didn't really have a lot of opportunities to open up the map for them. I mean, really everybody on Gen.G stepped up, and it really paved the way for a ginormous 3-0 sweep for Gen.G. So, what does this all mean? What does this all mean for the LCK? What does it mean for the two teams involved? Well, both of these teams are going to Worlds as the 1 and 2 seed. Gen.G winning, obviously securing the number 1 seed. T1 losing, securing the number 2 seed. That means both of them are in group stage, but Gen.G is in a little bit of a better spot, obviously being the number 1 seed, not having to potentially go into another top tier number 1 seed. Most notably, you got to worry about the LPL number 1 seed if you're T1. But I mean, if this isn't one of the most dominant LCK finals of all time, I don't know what to tell you. Player of the series, a little bit tough here because two players on this team were so phenomenal, but if you wanted to give it to either, I don't even really care. I'm not even going to pick. That's how I went into this video with like you got to pick one. I can't. I'm not even going to pick. If you want to give it to Peanut, I completely understand. If you want to give it to Ruler, I completely understand. Whichever one you want to give it to. They both played out of their minds in these 3 games. They both outclassed their opponent over and over and over again. Peanut won every single game, even on 2 matchups where he just simply had no business doing that in games 1 and 2. And Ruler on this Zeri was genuinely perfect. Like, you cannot ask an AD carry to be more flawless than what Ruler was in this series. So whichever one you want to pick, go ahead and give it to them. I really don't care. They were so phenomenal. It sucks for T1, but man, we gotta give credits where credit is due, and that credit is going to go to our Summer Champions and #1 seeded Gen.G team. I'm just so happy for this team, whether it's, you know, Peanut finally being able to overcome a lot of his demons, and Gen.G as an organization being able to overcome a lot of their demons. This is Peanut's 4th LCK title on a 4th different team, whether it be Rocks Tigers, SKT, Kingzone, and now Gen.G. Everywhere that Peanut has gone has basically gotten better. Even Nongshim last year was nearly a Worlds team. Like, Peanut has been so consistently phenomenal as one of the best junglers in the world for so long now. You have Ruler, the GOAT AD carry, in my opinion. You can all argue and yell at me in the comment sections about that. Ruler versus Uzi, I get it. It's a very interesting conversation, but for me, this solidifies Ruler as the greatest AD carry of all time. He's got the World Championship. He's got the LCK title. He's got the MVPs now. Truly someone who is meta-less. He has proven year after year after year that he, no matter what happens in this game, his macro, his mechanics, he will be one of the best players in the world. And he finally gets to host that LCK trophy that has been alluded to him for so long. And then you have the 3 Griffin players returning to the mountaintop, doing it for their dead organization. Doran, Lehens, and King Chovy himself finally being able to overcome the Griffin demons and win an LCK title. There really is not a better story that could be told here. A phenomenal season from a phenomenal, phenomenal team. And you just have to be proud of what these boys accomplished on this day. Alright, well that's gonna do it for my LCK Finals recap, but the video is not quite done yet. Not only are we going to be going over the final series like we just did, but we are now going to be previewing the LCK 2022 Regional Qualifier. I'm going to be giving you my predictions. The bracket is up on the screen now. I will be giving you my predictions for each series. Going a little bit in depth, this isn't going to be quite the playoff primer level, as I've already talked about all of these teams. If you want to see more in-depth analysis on all 4 of the teams that are competing in the regional qualifier, I highly recommend you check out my LCK playoff primer video. That's going to be up in the iCard right now. I give a really in-depth breakdown on all of these teams and how those matchups worked in the LCK, and a lot of these are going to be applicable here to the regional qualifier as well. So let's go ahead and get it started. Now, just a little bit of explaining of how the format works for those who aren't familiar with the regional qualifier. It's a little bit different this year. They've adopted the LPL style instead of what was traditionally the LCK style gauntlet that maybe North American or European viewers were familiar with from previous years, where the highest seeded team would be at the end of the gauntlet, and then all the teams behind them would have to play through to get to the top seed, and then the team that won out would end up making the World Championships. But it's a little bit different this year. They've adopted the LPL style, where now the 3rd and the 4th seeds in the LCK in terms of championship points will play off against each other in a battle for 3rd place. The winner of that is then the 3rd seed at Worlds. The loser of that moves on to the next round, where they play the winner of the 5-6 matchup, and then the loser and the winner play against each other for the 4th and final seed at the World Championship. So I hope that clarifies it at least a little bit. It's definitely a confusing format for those who aren't familiar with it, but you'll definitely get how it works as I'm going through my predictions. So let's go ahead and just kick it right off with our 3-4 matchup here between Liv Sandbox and Damwon Kia. Now, an incredibly interesting matchup here, because you have a team that really overexceeded a lot of expectations this year in Sandbox, with their superstar AD carry Prince, their breakout support Kale, and their really consistently phenomenal jungler Krako. But they do have weaknesses, most notably, in my opinion, their solo lanes. Now, Closer in the mid lane has been significantly better as of recently. A lot of the season, he definitely struggled, and he really struggled in adapting specifically to the meta at hand. But he's really figured it out recently. He's found his comfort zone away from the control mages on some more aggressive picks. He's definitely a primary assassin player, and I think he's been more consistent there. Dove also not the strongest player, but does offer you a little bit of draft flexibility, a former mid laner. We've been seeing a lot of the Akali Yone solo lane switch going on between these two, where both of them can pretty successfully play both, and they can just flip them through depending on which matchup they like better. Liv likes to do that. As for Damwon, definitely more of your traditional Damwon style. A lot of their wins this year came through jungle pressure with Canyon, and then eventually translating that into a mid and bot lane win, whether it be Showmaker being able to step up or Dectum getting a lot of resources this year. A lot of their wins have mostly come because Canyon has been able to generate that jungle lead. So, where do I think this matchup lands? Well, I think it's definitely interesting to see a couple of really fun matchups between these two teams, but at the end of the day, I think if I had to predict which one of these teams would win in a best of 5, I'm going to go with Damwon Kia. Now, a lot of people are going to be upset by this. A lot of people are going to see Liv potentially as the better team in the series, and I do think it's close, but I really think Damwon has a lot hidden up their sleeve. They got hot at the right time, and just because they weren't able to take care of T1 doesn't mean that they're not a good team. There was a reason that Gen.G would have rather faced Liv Sandbox than Damwon. That's because the ceiling, I think, of Damwon is significantly higher than what Liv Sandbox can bring out. They rely so much on Prince to be able to really carry their games in the late game, and I think Damwon can really set themselves up in a position with good early game pressure to be able to avoid situations like that. Now, I don't think it will be consistent, but maybe a 3-1, 3-2 in favor of Damwon is how I would expect this series to go. So that's my prediction, Damwon in either 4 or 5. You'll notice Liv Sandbox moves on. That's because Damwon, with this win, would have officially qualified as the 3rd seed in the LCK, and Liv Sandbox definitely still has a shot to play against the winner of DRX and KT, and that brings us to DRX versus KT Rolster. Now, this is an even more interesting matchup because you have the 5-seeded KT Rolster, another team that really kind of found its footing towards the back half by playing through their bot laner, Aiming, who really had a breakout year. Aiming's always been a good AD carry, but never really a great AD carry. Not someone that's ever been able to carry a team to the World Championships in a sense, but he really felt like he unlocked something this year. Playing with life certainly helps. And then you having the breakout performance of, LCK Broadcast Rookie of the Year, Vikla here, really helped out a lot for KT as well. Now, they definitely still have problems. I think the jungle situation has definitely been a little bit of a negative for them. Cuz has not been consistent. Rascal is a very good player in the top lane, someone who is a channel darling, one of the players on this channel that I think I love talking about the most, and I've said it over and over again, but Rascal can be exploited by strong top laners. Now, luckily, they're going into DRX, which isn't exactly the worst matchup in the world for KT. What does DRX like to play through? Well, DRX in their wins has typically played through mid lane. Now, that may surprise a lot of people because Deft has kind of been the face of this DRX team, at least for the majority of the year. And yes, Deft is very consistent, but they really don't often pump a lot of resources into that bottom lane. It is often Zika who receives a lot of the pressure here for DRX. Now, that has worked very well for them. I think Zika had a super underrated year in terms of how he performed, but you do have a couple of albatrosses on this team, at least in terms of consistency, being Pioshik in the jungle and Beryl at support. Two players that we've seen at the World Championships before. We've seen both of them be able to perform, but both of them have been incredibly inconsistent and honestly mostly negatives for this DRX team this year. So what does that mean for this particular matchup? Well, on their best days, I think DRX is the better team. On their worst days, I think they're the worst team. Which one do I think we're going to be getting here? In my opinion, I'm going to predict that the series goes to DRX, and that's definitely going to make some people mad. But I really do see the potential ceiling of this DRX team just so much higher than that of what KT can put out. I know I have a lot of KT fans in my comments section, and I really do sympathize. I really do think this team made monumental strides. I think Vikla is a very good player that you'd be very happy to have. I love Rascal. I think Aiming and Life have really unlocked something, but even at their best, I just don't know if they're on that same explosive level as a team like DRX. And I certainly think that KT has a good shot to be able to just win this series in 3 or 4 games, because there's a very good chance that players like Pioshik and Beryl just won't be the players that they are. But if they do show up in the best form possible, which they've had plenty of time to prepare for this matchup, they've known about it since the end of round 1. If they do show up at their best form, in my opinion, they should be the better team, and I would expect them to be able to take the series. Now, like I said, it will be close, and if KT just breezes by DRX, I certainly wouldn't be surprised, but if I had to put my money on anything, it's going to be DRX making it through. So that leaves us with our final match in the regional qualifier here, and a rematch of round 1 here in the playoffs. Liv Sandbox taking on DRX, and obviously Liv steamrolled that series in the actual LCK playoffs, but DRX is definitely one of those teams where a little bit of a Jekyll and a little bit of Hyde. You don't really know which one's going to show up on any given day. On their best day, I really do believe that they can beat Liv Sandbox, but am I going to predict that for the final seat at Worlds? I am not. I'm not going to go quite that far. I do think Liv Sandbox should be able to take the series and secure their spot as the play-in team from the LCK at Worlds. I just think they're more consistent, and that's really what it's about. When you talk about DRX and you talk about matchups, I honestly think they match up into Liv Sandbox relatively poorly. Prince is one of the few AD carries that can push Deft and put him in a spot where he can't be quite as consistent as he is most of the year. And honestly, if this team really wants to play through jungle, and if jungle is really an important part of DRX's game plan and Pioshik kind of being on that same page and being aggressive and being able to make plays, Krakow does a phenomenal job of shutting that down, and we saw that in the regular season when these teams matched up, and then again in the playoffs. Krakow just had Pioshik's number, and it really wasn't all that close. So I would expect Liv Sandbox to just be too much of a bad matchup for DRX, even if we get the good DRX. I definitely think it's possible for them to take the win, but Liv should be the better team here in 3 or 4 games. They should be able to take it, and that would secure their spot at the World Championships as well. So those are my predictions for the regional qualifier. Let me know how you feel about them down in the comment section below. I'm definitely going to get some angry KT fans yelling at me, but just in case anybody was wondering, I would definitely still pick Liv Sandbox over KT Rolster. In fact, I think Liv Sandbox, and this is going to really make some KT fans mad, is just kind of a better version of KT Rolster, and so I definitely would pick them probably in a 3-0 or a 3-1. But, you know, so it doesn't really change too much. It's just about whether or not which one's coming out, in my opinion. But definitely going to get some angry fans down there, but plead your case. Let me know why I'm underrating KT. Let me know why I'm underrating Liv Sandbox. Anybody who's been around the channel knows I love to have those discussions. I love to talk with you guys in the comment section below, so leave your thoughts down there. But that's it. That's my LCK Finals video, along with my regional qualifier predictions. And I really do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please go ahead and leave a like. It really does help out the channel a lot. It lets me know that you guys are enjoying the content. It lets me know that there are a ton of LCK fans out there that really enjoy the things that I'm putting out. So if you did enjoy it, I highly recommend you hit the like button. And obviously sit here and subscribe. If you're sticking around, you might as well hit that button. Hit the bell. It lets you know when the videos come out. I've been dropping basically daily since the playoffs have started because of the amount of content. But if you hit that bell, you'll definitely not miss any of either the playoff content or, you know, just in about a month or so, some of the Worlds content that's going to be coming out here. So I highly recommend, if you enjoy what I do, to hit that button. I've heard it really helps with algorithm stuff, so it definitely helps out the channel a lot. But aside from all that, I just want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to you guys. I've gotten a huge, heartwarming response coming back to these videos. Obviously, still do work a full-time job outside of this, but you guys have really ignited my passion to start doing these videos again, and I just want to say thank you for a great year of LCK. It's not over yet. We still have to talk about the regional qualifier, but with the playoffs coming to an end, I just wanted to say thank you to all you guys for sticking around and enjoying the content and responding in the comments and having these discussions. It's been awesome to talk League of Legends with every single one of you, so I really do appreciate you all, and you really, like, this has been a blast, and I can't wait to keep this up for Worlds and then moving into next year and everything like that. So I really, really do appreciate everybody watching the video and everybody who helps me make the content. It's been phenomenal. So yeah, that's going to do it. With all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.